Welcome to Quarantine History of Otter Tail County. I'm your host, Chris Schuelke from the Otter Tail County Historical Society, and we are back at Mount Pleasant Cemetery, the final resting place of many Cutlerites, the Mormon splinter group that formed Clitheroe, Otter Tail County's first permanent settlement. Mount Pleasant's first burial belongs to that of William Mason, right before me. Mason's circuitous journey to Clitheroe actually began in Alabama, where he and his brother Tom were born. As young men, the brothers had an argument with a neighbor that boiled over until William killed the neighbor's dog. This led to more confrontations, which tragically resulted in William shooting the neighbor. Well, now a blood feud, William realized it would go on and on unless he and Tom left Alabama for good. As a result, they set out for the north, with Tom leaving behind a wife and child. The Masons eventually made their way to Silver Creek Township in southwestern Iowa, where they worked at well digging and shoemaking. Now, Silver Creek was on the stage road that in 1856 had 500 Mormon families pass through on their exodus from Nauvoo, Illinois. It was here that William and Tom were united with the church and joined the Cutlerites on their journey to Minnesota. Now, William integrated into the Cutlerite community much more readily than his younger brother Tom. Whereas William was talkative and genial, Tom was said to be crabbed in speech, using only the shortest words and then sparingly. Tom was apparently also easily offended, and when combined with his manner of speaking, often made him appear ungrateful. Alta Kimber said that Tom hovered near the 0 mark in natural affection, even to his brother. Now, during the winter of 1867, William left for Alexandria to earn some extra cash making shoes. He was there for a few weeks, and then he decided to walk back to Clitheroe, a distance of about 32 miles. Now, the first day, he went as far as Millerville, a village on the western side of the Leaf Mountains, and he stayed overnight with a homesteader. The next morning, the sky looked threatening, and although the homesteader urged William to stay another night, William decided to set out. By noon, a light snow had turned into a raging blizzard. William managed to get within a few miles of Clitheroe when, overcome by snow and cold, he fell headfirst into a snowbank. Since no one in Clitheroe knew when William was returning, no alarm was raised. Eventually, search parties were sent out, but without success. Later that spring, as several Cutlerites were leaving with a load of grain for Sauk Center, one observed what looked like a stovepipe sticking out of the snow. Well, he jumped down to see what it was and found a boot sticking out of the snow. And inside the boot was the foot and body of William Mason. The men turned around, bringing the body with them. While a sadness and gloom hung over the community, Tom Mason appeared indifferent. In fact, the first thing he did was search his brother's pockets for money. And now join me as we go to the gravesite of Louis Denna. Well, we are now at the gravesite of Louis Denna, an Oneida Indian who played a central role in the founding of Clitheroe. Denna was working as an agent for a group of Oneida Indians when in 1840 he ended up camping near Nauvoo, Illinois. There he met a young Mormon named Allen Dimmick, who invited Denna and his wife into his home. A friendship developed, and the Dennas ended up being converted to the Latter-day Saints. Denna's conversion was a great source of pride for the early Mormons. He was the first Native American to receive the priesthood and, quote, the first Lamanite who has been admitted a member of any quorum of the church. Well, what exactly is a Lamanite? According to the Latter-day Saints, Lamanites are one of 4 civilizations of the Book of Mormon. Initially, the Mormons identified Lamanites as the primary ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. However, the 2006 version of the Book of Mormon states only that the Lamanites are, quote, among the ancestors of the American Indians. Lewis Denna met Alpheus Cutler in 1847 when Brigham Young sent Cutler and Denna on a mission to convert Native Americans in Kansas Territory. Although the project was a complete failure, Cutler and Denna grew close. And when Alpheus Cutler dictated that his people move to Minnesota, Lewis Denna joined him. Denna headed the original scouting party that left Iowa on September 29, 1864. The importance of his selection cannot be understated. None of the Cutlerites had ever been to Minnesota, and with thousands of lakes, how could they hope to find the place that Cutler had foretold? Well, Denna's plan was to travel northeast to find a man that he did not know personally, but certainly knew by reputation. That man was the Reverend John Johnson Engabawa, an Ojibwe who had been ordained a deacon in the Episcopal Church. Denna knew Engabawa lived near Crow Wing, which is present-day Brainerd, and when the scouting party wintered in Red Wing, Denna and Sylvester Whiting walked to Crow Wing to confer with Engabawa about which route the Cutlerites should take. Now, the Reverend was sympathetic. He saw commonalities between the Ojibwe and the Cutlerites. Both groups shared values of community and holding property in common, and the formation of an agricultural community based on religious beliefs. And so, due to the contributions of Lewis Denna and John Johnson Engabawa, it is probable that Clitheroe was located at the instigation of 2 indigenous people. And now we go to the grave sites of Rachel and Hiram Murdock. On a bluff overlooking Hiram and Rachel Murdoch's home was a pole swing constructed in 1867. During long summer evenings, Cutlerite youth would gather there for singing and conversation and courting. Many young women were proposed to at the pole swing, as Emma Anderson so aptly described. But my lover sat beside me there, and asked would I his bride be, while so gently swayed the old town swing. Hiram and Rachel Murdoch and their 8 children were among the 23 families that left Manti for Clitheroe on May 31st, 1865. Their oldest son, 15-year-old Charles, walked the entire distance herding the family's sheep. The journey to Minnesota was one of many challenges the Murdocks faced throughout their lives. Rachel Kelsey married Hiram Murdoch in a ceremony presided over by Brigham Young. They had barely settled into married life when they were forced to flee anti-Mormon mobs that eventually drove them to Manti, Iowa. While there, Alpheus Cutler led a mission to convert the Native Americans on the Grasshopper River in Kansas Territory. Joining Cutler and Louis Denna were Hiram and Rachel Murdoch, their two children Charles and Martha, and Rachel's mother. And during 5 desperately poor years, Rachel's mother and daughter Martha died. And during the return trip, the Murdochs' 4-month-old daughter Eliza became chilled when her clothes were drenched as their wagon crossed an icy stream. Eliza did not recover. And before they could reach Manti, they stopped to bury her beside the trail. There was no casket, no headstone, just a hole in the vast, unending prairie. Several years later, the Murdocks were on the move again, this time to Clitheroe. And while they were finally able to put down roots, the demands of caring for a growing family was great. In addition, they faced challenges from within the Cutlerite community, especially from a man named Joseph Edmund Fletcher. And now we're going to go to the gravesite of Joseph Edmund Fletcher. Joseph Edmund Fletcher, otherwise known within the Cutlerite community as Father Fletcher, was an elderly Cutlerite who imagined himself a prophet and seer. He claimed to receive messages from heaven that he would then write down on scraps of paper and deliver to the recipients. Many of the messages were directed at Hiram Murdoch, who intensely disliked and feared Joseph Edmund Fletcher. The two often argued, despite Rachel's pleas to ignore the old man. After one bitter dispute, Hiram thought he had gotten the better of the old man, and he laughed at him. An angry Father Fletcher menacingly said, "Brother Hiram, the sectarian spirit don't like to be laughed at." Shortly after this, Hiram became very ill. He feared Fletcher had cursed him, and he implored his family not to let him into the house. The old man, however, seemed intent on agitating Hiram Murdoch. He came to the house and he would knock on the door and peer through the windows. On one occasion, he apparently caught the family off guard and got in. He went into Hiram's sick room and repeated over and over, "Brother Hiram, the sectarian spirit don't like to be laughed at." Soon Hiram's illness worsened and he became delirious. But when his fever finally broke, he told Rachel that he had been with Father Fletcher, wandering day and night through the woods, prairie, and sloughs, setting fires. Even though Hiram's fever had broken, an abscess had formed in his chest. It grew and grew until his chest was enlarged and inflamed. Cutlerite elders gathered around his bed and after the laying on of hands, decided upon a course of action. Warren Whiting sharpened his jackknife and he bared Hiram's chest. Aiming for the center of the infection and with nothing to deaden the pain, he plunged the knife into his chest. Prodding, he forced the blade to the hilt, and when he turned it slightly, a stream of pus and blood shot out. Standing at the foot of the bed, Emily Murdoch thought her father was being murdered. The wound drained for weeks as Hiram recovered. And now we finish up today by going to the gravesite of Rachel Murdoch. The Murdoch station in life improved a bit when a stagecoach began running a line from Otter Tail City south to Chippewa County. When the route was determined, the stage company arranged to place fresh horses in Hiram Murdoch's barn. Often the drivers were hungry and would pay for a meal at the Murdochs for 50 cents. Now, before long, passengers were also purchasing meals. Chauncey Whiting made a sign by the side of the road that included a crude drawing of a stagecoach with the words "Farmer's House" printed on it. And within a few months, the stage was bringing passengers to the Murdochs every day for Rachel's home-cooked meals. The income was welcome, but the work of preparing meals was an additional burden for Rachel. According to Nina Tucker, one afternoon Rachel sat down in her rocker to rest and never got back up. She died peacefully at the age of 64. Well, that's all for today. Remember to subscribe and turn on your notification, and check out our website and how you can continue to support the Otter Tail County Historical Society. We'll see you next time on Quarantine History of Otter Tail County.